Hi, my name is Michael Smook. I'm speaking to you from my home in Forest Hills, New York. Forest Hills is in Queens County, which is an outer borough of the city of New York. Today is January 1st. It's a Tuesday, and we're in the year 2019. And Happy New Year, everyone. And Today it's episode 28. It's a two-parter, and it's entitled Worship, Work, and Wallenberg. In 2 weeks, we'll record part two about Raoul Wallenberg, a righteous Gentile who, with a team of diplomats, saved 100,000 lives of Hungarian Jews who were destined for almost certain death by Nazi genocide. And this is based, and then today we're going to do part one, in a second we'll get to that. This is based on a talk I gave a month ago at the Riverdale Y and in the Bronx. And or even further back, it's based on episode two, which we covered, episode two, which we covered. And the reason why we're covering this ground again stems from the fact that it's comprehensive, it's insightful, and it resonates inside me. So that's why we're talking about it today, because I think it'll be interesting, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about it. So today, we're going to talk about the worship and the work part of this talk. And now that we've completed chapter one, the introduction, and we've summarized episode 28, parts one and two, let's go to chapter two, worship. 3 years ago, my wife and I attended a high holiday service at a conservative shul. We have two sets of friends who are members of this shul, and it was an unusual, atypical high holiday service. For starters, the leader of the congregation was not a rabbi, it was a cantor. She's very knowledgeable about Torah and Talmud. She has a beautiful singing voice. She's a dynamic, charismatic personality. So it was going to be interesting. And so what happened is, at first we started a normal high holiday service where the cantor was on stage. They hired a rabbi for the holidays, and between the two of them, they're leading the congregations, and they're speaking, and then we're responding in the prayer book. And then at a certain time, the cantor said, we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to get you on your feet. I'm going to get the blood pumping, and we're going to get you to participate. And we're going to take a break from the usual high holiday service. This was a high holiday service for the first day of Jewish New Year's, Rosh Hashanah. So the cantor had a half a dozen photographs, 18 by 18 pieces of photographs that were 18 by 18 inches, and she handed them out. One was of a fortress around Roman times called Masada. One was of the Great Salt Lake in Israel called the Dead Sea. Another one was a farm in Israel. It could have been a kibbutz or a moshav. The Israelis lead the world in desert farming. Another photo was Israeli fighter jets, F-15 and F-16s. They have arguably the best air force in the world. And there were 6 photos overall. The last photo was of the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is what's left of the great temple that was destroyed in 70 A.D. in a civil war between the Roman legions and ancient Hebrew guerrilla fighters led by General Bar Kokhba and a Rabbi Akiva. And it just so happens the last photo, the cantor was handing them out to different people in the congregation. The last photo she handed out was to me of the Wailing Wall. And then she instructed the people with photos to spread out throughout the sanctuary. And she said, separate yourselves and then hold the pictures up. And then she told the rest of the congregation, she said, look at the photos, and I want you to walk over to the photo that aligns with your thoughts and feelings as an American Jew and relates to what do you think about Israel and your fidelity towards Israel. So that's what the rest of the congregation did. They broke into they broke into 6 pieces, and about a sixth or a little more of the people walked over to me, and we started talking, and as did the rest of the congregation to the other 5 photos. So and the cantor gave us 15 minutes to talk about this. So we spoke for 15 minutes, and two people spoke about their thoughts and feelings about what the photos meant. And then at the end of our allotted time, the group decided that I would speak on their behalf and that other people might also speak as well. And then the cantor called us back to our seats, and she asked the people with the photos to hold on to the photos. So at first, the cantor is she's going around the room and she's asking the people holding the photos to stand up and in a 360-degree motion show the photo to everyone in the sanctuary. And then the person holding the photo, she asked them to speak, and then other people spoke as well. She finally made her way over to me, and she knew me, even though we were guests there. We had been to services before. She knew my name, and she said, Michael, why don't you stand up, show the photo to everyone in the sanctuary, and why don't you tell us something addition about the Wailing Wall? And so I said, the Wailing Wall is quite interesting because from 70 AD, from the time it was destroyed in a warfare between Hebrew guerrilla fighters and the Roman legions, it was destroyed. And from 70 AD to 1948, there was no Jewish nation state, and we were spread out throughout the four corners of the world. And it wasn't until 19 years after there was a Jewish nation state, it wasn't until 19 years after that, after the Six-Day War, that Israelis were able to pray at the Wailing Wall, and American Jews and Jews throughout the world could come there and well. And it's a tradition to pray at the Wailing Wall and then to write a prayer or a wish or a thought onto a piece of paper, roll it up, and insert it in a crack in the Wailing Wall. That's the culture in there, and it's an iconic edifice which left of the second great temple of the Jewish people. So, and then I said, and it stands for other things. And the cantor, I had piqued the cantor's interest, and she said, "Why don't you continue what you're thinking, Michael, and you're feeling?" And I said, "Well, the thing about it is, after the Second Temple was destroyed, and we're spread throughout, some Jews remained in Jerusalem and in Greater Israel, and of course the Romans renamed it to Palestine. They wanted to wipe out the Jewish existence there." So what happened is we're spread out throughout the four corners of the world. So the question is, when the Roman Empire became a Christian empire, why didn't we become Christians? When those Jews in the Middle East, when between 700 and 800 AD, when Muslims, Islam was created in the Arabian Peninsula and figuratively exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula throughout the Middle East, throughout Asia, North Africa. Why didn't the Jews living there become Muslims? So why did we remain fidelity towards remaining Jews? And the thing about it is, we took our Torah and Talmud with us. We studied, we celebrated holidays, we studied our holy books, and we remained, remained Jews. And also to put a roof over our head, food in our stomachs, clothes on our backs for ourselves, our wives, our partners, our children. We worked in professions, trades, business, and agriculture. And that's how we were able to survive. And that's about what I said that day. And because I didn't have that much time to even go into further detail, what else I'll share with you about Jewish survival during the 1900 years after the destruction of the Great Temple. We've not only influenced our own religious faith. We're a small people, 14 or 15 million worldwide. There are 2.2 billion Christians, 1.6 billion Muslims. When they trace their lineage, if you're a Christian, before Jesus, who is the matriarch and the patriarch of Christianity? And it's Abraham and Sarah. If you're a Muslim and you trace your lineage back from Muhammad, you walk back to Abraham and his other woman who had a child, Ishmael, who is the lineage to Islam to the time of Muhammad. So the thing about it is, So the thing about it is, uh, so the thing about it is, there is a connection between the Jewish people and Christianity and Islam. So in a sense, we're all cousins. And also, I would say what the Jewish people have given the world, perhaps the most important thing, is belief in an invisible God, not an idol, not the moon, not the sun, not the stars. It was a God who created the universe, the earth, and every living creature on it, including humankind. And this God gave us laws and commanded us. We were chosen to obey these laws and live them every day, and then rest on the seventh day, because God created the universe in 6 days. So that's what the Jewish people, as a monotheistic faith, we might not have been the first monotheistic faith, but we were the first faith that believed in one God who gave us a chore to do, to live a life that's reflective of God's laws. And this is something that other monotheistic faiths follow as well. So that's what I didn't have a chance to say to the cantor, the rabbi, and the congregation that day. But since we have a little extra time, I'm sharing it with you today. So that's the worship part of the talk. Now let's go to the work part of the talk. I work in municipal public health, administration, and finance. And what we do in government is sort of a secular version of what we do every day in our Jewish faith. What we try to do in public health is we try to make the world a better place. And what we do is we give vaccinations to people to prevent diseases. When there are new diseases that come to America, Zika, Ebola, West Nile, what we do is we manage situations. When it's endemic, like West Nile, every year we do spraying, and we're out in the field, and we're engaged in trying to minimize the effect of West Nile. And with Zika and Ebola, we do testing, we do initial treatment, and then we refer people to ongoing providers. We're public health, and then we refer people to city hospitals and city clinics. So that's what we do in a secular way in government, which aligns with what we do in a religious or theological way and spiritual way in the Jewish faith. And so that about covers what we do in terms of work. And I'm involved in administration and finance. And so what happened is one day I wanted to allow my agency to have other sources of revenue besides city tax levy as well as grants. I thought that there were more opportunities in terms of third-party revenue that we could bill for services rendered to people who come into our specialty clinics. So I had an idea that we could participate with Medicare Part B. And to accomplish this task, I was able to persuade higher up people within my organization to hire a graduate student who's going to an Ivy League school. And this woman was African American, and she was a Christian. And we don't talk about religion, not normally, but one day, and we've been working together for about a year on these endeavors, so we could participate with Medicare Part B. And one day, atypically, she said to me, "Michael, what does it mean to be Jewish?" And no one had ever asked me that question before. And at first my mind was a blank. And then what happened was I had a moment of clarity, and the words tumbled out of my mouth. And then I said to my coworker and my intern, who was my subordinate, I said, "Why don't you have a seat? And I'm going to write this on a piece of paper. And as I'm writing it out, I'm going to speak this to you." And then she sat down, I sat down, and I wrote out on a piece of paper, I wrote out, "What does it mean to be Jewish?" with a question mark. And then on the left-hand side of the page, in English, I wrote out the word Rachmanis. And then in the middle of the page, I wrote out an equal sign. And then on the right-hand side of the page, I wrote out the word compassion. And then below that, I wrote out the words in English, tzedakah and mitzvot. And then I wrote an equal sign in the middle of the page. And then on the right-hand side of the middle of the page, I wrote out the words charity and good deeds. And then below that, the last words I wrote out, I spelled it in English again, Tikkun Olam, and then that's what I wrote out. And then in the middle of the page, I wrote an equal sign, and the right-hand side of the page, I wrote out the words "Heal the World," and then I signed it and dated it. And I said that to my coworker, and at this time temporarily my student, I said, "This is what it means to be Jewish." And if you add in the fact that I didn't write on the page that we believe in an invisible God who created the universe, who commands us to obey these concepts. And then I said, what we do as Jews aligns with what other monotheistic faiths believe in, including Islam and Christianity. And when you look at it, the most important phrase to me is Tikkun Olam, heal the world, because it's inclusive of Rahmanas, compassion, tzedakah, and mitzvot, uh, charity and good deeds. To heal the world is inclusive of all that. So that's what I think, and basically what it means to be Jewish, and that's why the Jewish religious faith aligns with other monotheistic faiths. And then I handed her the piece of paper, and I said, "So there you have it." And that was the end of our conversation. I'm pretty sure we keep in touch that she remembers that conversation, and I remember it very well because I'm using it today, and we've spoken about it briefly in some other YouTube talks as well. And it helps align my thinking and keep me on track, and it's important to remember. Now, in expanding and on the Wallenberg subject matter and what we've covered thus far in the past 15 minutes or so, how does what we're talking about align with what Raoul Wallenberg and a team of Swedish diplomats what they did? And it relates to I wanted to expand on this and make it more insightful. And when I was on the internet and I was surfing the net, and I found out a quote from the Talmud, which says that if you if you save the world, it's as if you've saved one life, it's as if you've saved the entire world. And then I'm thinking, well, Wallenberg and his team were involved in saving 100,000 lives of Hungarian Jews. And if you extrapolate, even though most of those people who were saved 74 years ago, they're no longer living, but they have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. There are perhaps as many as 500,000 people alive today that wouldn't be alive if not for his heroic efforts and members of his team. So just getting back to the initial lives saved in 1944-45, where the strategy was to essentially keep people in safe houses and due to the contract of extraterritoriality, the German Nazis and the Hungarian fascists, for the most part, respected Swedish neutrality, and they allowed these people to stay in these safe houses. So if you do the math and you save one world times 100,000 people in a romantic, poetic, spiritual, theological, and figurative way, we could say that Wallenberg and his team saved 100,000 worlds. They saved so many worlds. And so when you take when taking a step back, when you look at to heal the world, that's immense. But when you expand that and you're saving the world, that's even more awesome. So that's how what we're talking about in the worship and work part of the talk today aligns with the heroic efforts and humanitarian efforts of Wallenberg and his team in 1944-45. And here we are 74 years later, it resonates inside me today. And it's still important, and these men and their heroic efforts are worth. It's praiseworthy to remember what they did way back then, and that about covers everything I wanted to talk to today. So today is January 1st. It's a Tuesday, and we're in the year 2019. Once again, Happy New Year, everyone. And I'm speaking to you from my home in Forest Hills, New York. Forest Hills is in Queens County, which is an outer borough of the city of New York. And it's episode 28, part one, Worship, Work, and Wallenberg. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with part two. And so until next time, goodbye and good luck.